let's move on to animating our spaceships, or airships as I have them called here rather. So let's just expand this a little bit and have a look. So I want to add some movement to all of these so that it looks like they're flying in and out of the frame and, adding just a little bit of extra movement to the shot. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to go to my, where can I find it? Airships folder, and I'll go through every single one of these and select the combiner. And let's have a look at moving it here. So first of all, I think I want to keyframe this frame, so let's set keyframe, and I'm gonna go back to frame 1. I'm gonna move this back a little bit, something like this, and let's set keyframe here. And so now our spaceship moves, and once we render it, it will be moving through the shot. So that's very simple. Let's go on and quickly animate the other ones as well. For example, this big one in the corner, I think I want to animate it slightly differently, and this is why I will have to repaint this. And this is maybe my mistake, I should have maybe thought of this sooner, but I was originally doing the piece as a concept, so I didn't consider this. But basically, I don't want this spaceship to only appear this far into the frame on frame 50, because it means that if it's flying in this direction, just from the outside into the image, it means that it will be invisible for most of the shot and just poke out right at the end. So I think instead, I want to move it forwards a little bit, maybe to around here. Okay. And I'm going to set a keyframe here. And again, go back to my frame 1. And here I'm going to pull it all the way back out of the image. Maybe okay, something like this. And I'm going to set a keyframe here as well. And so now we're going to have our spaceship flying into the shot as the shot progresses. So I think that's slightly more exciting. So now I'm just going to skip through and animate the rest of my spaceships in this same way. And it's very simple, and of course you can do much more complex animations for your projection setups. This is just a very simple example to show you what you could be doing, just to give you some ideas. Okay, so let's move on. Alright, so now I've animated my other spaceships, so we get movement on all of them. If we look here, we can see the change between frame 1 and frame 50. So they all move slightly. I'm trying not to overdo it. Maybe it's still a little bit too much, but let's go with this because it's good for the example. So what I'm going to do up next is I will take my environment light for the airships. I will also take my airship's textures and the distant light, as well as the ambient occlusion for the airships, and the Z depth. So all of these still work just fine, even with an animated camera. We've just got to swap it out here for all of them. And if you've not done it yet, you can just select all of these at once, and select the render cam, and it will apply to all of them. And so now let's render out our frame 50 through here for all of these different render layers, and let's quickly jump back into Photoshop for the overpainting. And you can skip this part because we already did this previously and it's exactly the same techniques, but I'm just going to quickly have a run through just so we can refresh our memories. Okay, so in Photoshop I have brought in all of my previous layers, including the lights and the texture renders, and I've just combined them down and merge them all into one layer. However, if you think back to all of the techniques we used for applying the textures, as well as using masks, things like that, painting them in, this is exactly the same. So this can be a little exercise for you guys to try doing these techniques on your own and just have some fun to see what kind of results you can get. So in addition to my textures, I have taken my ambient occlusion render path and applied it over the top. We will just project these back on together. So in addition to this, however, we want to select our layer and let's create an alpha that will be the exact same shape as our spaceships. And also let's select our textures and duplicate them. And here for the bottom layer of these textures, let's go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And we have this, but let's click Ctrl plus J several times to duplicate this. And so now what we have is this outline around our spaceships, and this is a nice little trick. If you ever find that with your projections on sort of standalone objects, you're getting outlines in white, what is happening is your other textures are bleeding through in the projection on the surrounding pixel. So if you do this, it will be okay because we are still projected onto these spaceships that are this exact same shape. So this transparent stuff will not be seen. However, we still have an alpha, which will also help us if needed to cut it down to just the correct shape. So it's a nice little trick. So let's take this image and let's bring it back into Clarice. Alright, so let's disable all of these other airships layers and let's just duplicate the bottom one, and we're going to call this DMP airships. And what we're going to do here in the projections, we are going to create a new context, and we're going to call this DMP airships, and we'll create a new material matte, DMP airships matte, and we're going to import texture streaming map file and go to our Photoshop render layers, and we have our DMP airships 01 frame 50. So we see this exact thing that we just rendered out of Photoshop, and let's see how this would work if we currently projected it. So let's just select our camera, world, frame 50, and here let's select our DMP, not for the shading layer, for the override material, let's select our DMP airships matte. And here in the material, let's plug in our projection. And so as you can see, this works well on frame 50. However, if we move the camera or move the viewer on the timeline, we can instantly see the problems in that the projection is not moving even though the models of the ships are moving. So we somehow need to stick these projections to our models of the spaceships. So what we're going to do is, here, we will simply change this to BR DMP airships 01 matte for the airship that is number 1, which is this one. And here, we are going to project from a slightly different camera. So let's go and grab this camera and go to our airships, and I'm just going to paste a copy of it, and I'm going to call this 1. And let me assign it here in the camera projection. And here in the camera, let's, on frame 50 where the projection matches, let's parent it to our matching airship, which is 01, and I'm just going to parent it to this combiner which is animated. And in this way, if I go to my camera, we can see that it inherits the movement of the airship if we follow this orange camera. So now as my airship moves, my camera moves just as much. And you can see even though the projection breaks on the other airships, if we zoom into my airship 1, because the camera with the projection is moving at the same velocity as the airship, the projection sticks perfectly. So what we're going to do is we're just going to grab these and copy them, and I'm just going to quickly rename them. So here in the 02 mat, let's connect our 02. Oh, by the way, it automatically connects, so you don't even have to worry about that. And let's go back to our frame 50 where the projections originate, and let's make a copy of this camera. And what I'm going to do is deselect this airship 1 combiner and select my airship 2 combiner. And now this has its own animation. And if we check here, let's connect our new camera to this airships 2 material. And let's create a new shading layer, and we're going to call this airships SL. And we're just going to create a few rules. I think this many. Let's go to our airships, and here let's just copy airship 1. Here we're going to put in airship 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And let's put in a / and star. Select everything in those folders. Just copying and pasting that a little bit here. And let's apply our materials. So 1 to 1, 2 to 2. And here in the airships, let's deselect the override material, and instead let's plug in our shading layer. So now we can see only this and this airship have the textures projected because they're the only ones that I've connected textures to. So if we scroll back a bit, we can see that our textures stick perfectly to the airships because the cameras that they are projected from are parented to the airships themselves. So let's do this for all of the other airships as well. Alright, great. So now I've just repeated this step and copied the texture, the material, and the camera. And then for each camera, I changed the parent to a different combiner from each different spaceship. And as we can see now, all of these textures that we have painted for the spaceships stick to them perfectly. So for our nuke sequence, we will want to render out this layer of DMP airships, as well as Z-depth for our airships as well. However, all the other layers we can now delete. So let's select this, this, and this. Oh, oops. Instead, move them up. And let's just delete these, as well as this, just to clear up a little bit of space. Let's have a look. Yeah, we can delete these as well now. If you want to keep them, just in case you make any changes in your project, feel free to do so, but I know that I'm done with this part now, so I'm just going to delete them to save myself a little bit of a hassle with finding layers here. Okay. These as well we can get rid of. Let's keep these for now. Airships. Ambient occlusion I can delete now. we will still play around a little bit more with these maybe. But okay, now let's have a look. We have our airships, and we're going to keep the depth layer for them as well. However, one thing that I'm noticing is that these airships are not being occluded by the objects we have in the background. For example, if we quickly look through our render camera here, we can see that if I just select it, which one is it? This one, 6. We can see that this should be occluded by the tower in front of it. However, here it isn't. So how can we fix this? Well, I think what we're going to do is we'll create a new geometry group. And here we've already got it, and here I've called it airships geo all. However, what we're going to do, just to make this a little bit better, is we're going to our geo folder, and let's select our city as well as the temples, small towers, and I think columns. Okay, and let's combine them. So this doesn't delete these folders or anything. However, it creates a combiner which has all of them within it, and we're going to call this city combiner. And in the city combiner settings, what we're going to do is go down to shading and set this to be a matte object, and we'll set the matte alpha to be 0. And now if we go to our airships, into the geo all group, and to the inclusion items, let's add this city combiner. And now, as you can see, the city combiner now exists within this render. However, it is being not rendered. So we just get the parts of the spaceships that would be visible. If I turn this off, we have the whole spaceship, and here we have the tower that obscures it, as well as everything else. So it's just a slightly better way of doing this, because then we don't have to change anything in Nuke to try and fix this not passing behind the building correctly. And there are a lot of uses for this technique. I'm sure you can imagine how, if you want to split different objects from your render onto different layers, but have them occlude each other so that you are not rendering parts that won't be seen, you can just use this technique to mask the other layers out from each other and save a little bit of render time, as well as make your comping job a little bit easier. So next up, let's add our jet engines to these jets by parenting some planes that we then will project, or just add as a texture our Nuke jet setup that we rendered out with the flame. Okay, let's go.